Senate Democrats, Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren, are fighting pretty aggressively to get Joe Biden to cancel up to $50,000 of federal student loan debt through executive action. Now, the education secretary can do that. The executive branch can actually cancel all of your federal student loan debt. So what we're hearing from Biden, what we previously heard from Biden, is not so great. But let me give you the details of what Schumer and Warren are calling for. The resolution calls on the president to use executive action for student loan cancellation in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. The resolution is similar to the resolution that Schumer and Warren introduced back in September. Since then, though, Schumer has clarified only student loan borrowers with federal student loans who earn less than $125,000 would be eligible. So their proposal does not call for a cancellation of all student loan debt, and it also is a means-tested program, or at least what they're proposing that Biden does is pass an executive order that is in fact means-tested. There are approximately 45 million borrowers who collectively owe $1.7 trillion. Of that total, approximately 44 million borrowers collectively owe 1.5 trillion of federal student loan debt, and approximately 9 million borrowers are currently defaulting on their student loans. So this is a serious problem. And I would honestly demand that Joe Biden cancel all federal student loan debt, not $50,000, not $10,000, which he had floated before. And my argument is that part of the reason why student loan debt is astronomical, and part of the reason why, not part of the reason, the main reason why students are unable to discharge that student loan debt through bankruptcy is because of bankruptcy legislation that Joe Biden championed and passed when he was in Congress. In fact, back in 2015, David Sirota talked about this in great detail during an interview on Democracy Now! Let's quickly watch that video and I'll give you more.
There was a series of other bills through the 1980s and into the 1990s in which Joe Biden worked on the same set of issues, lengthening the amount of time students would have to wait to be able to access bankruptcy protections for educational debt. And then, as you noted, into the late 1990s and the 2000s, there was this push by Biden. He was a key Democrat pushing the bankruptcy bill that was ultimately signed by President George W. Bush that eliminated the ability of most Americans to seek bankruptcy protections, not only for their government loans, but also for their private student loans. So that was a big objective of the private lenders. At the time, over his career, Joe Biden has raised about $2 million from the financial sector while he's been sculpting these bills. And again, he played the key role throughout the last 3 decades in the Democratic Party, really in Congress, pushing these bills.
Okay, so that's why David Sirota's hated by the establishment, because again, he brings receipts. And once again, mainstream media has no answer for this. Did Joe Biden actually put the albatross around our neck on uncancelable student debt? Yes, definitely. There's no question about it. Any of you can look it up. It is not in dispute, right? But nonetheless, when it was brought up in the primaries, by people like David Sirota and us, the mainstream media was scandalized. How dare you tell people the truth about his voting record? Okay, that's cool. Just prove us wrong. I'm okay. Like, just maybe we got it wrong. So tell us, hey, he didn't actually vote for that, or he didn't sponsor it or anything. I'm ready. No, he did. We just don't want you to say it. Okay, so now that winds up having an effect when he's president, because now Schumer and Warren are saying $50,000 and Biden's saying $10,000 already. A giant difference. Second of all, that doesn't even matter half as much as Schumer and Warren are saying do it through executive action and we'll have it tomorrow, right? And Biden is saying, no, I want it to be passed through Congress. That's a curious thing to say. If you're the person who has the power to do executive orders, why would you voluntarily give up that power? Trump tried to do executive orders for things he didn't even have a power to do, right? And everything he had a power to do, he did through executive order. And he didn't care 1%, and neither did Mitch McConnell, and honestly, neither did many people in the media. They might have cared about his tweets, etc. But as he's passing one brutal thing after another through executive order, they're like, well, it is what it is. Let's go back to the tweets, right? And so now Biden goes, unilateral disarmament. Now, look, we're fair. He did some executive orders in the beginning that we liked, and we gave them credit for it. But there's no reason why you can't. In fact, the legislative language is super clear. It says there's no question that you could cancel the debt. And if you're a conservative and you've argued your whole life that you believe in the plain reading of the statute, well, it's very clear in the statute what it says. The president or the secretary of education.
I have the statute.
Yeah, we're going
to get to read it for you.
Oh, yeah, in a second.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just to finish the thought. The executive branch can absolutely cancel the debt. So Biden is choosing not to. That then forces you to wonder, why is he choosing to do that? If he really was driven and passionate to cancel the student debt as we are, wouldn't he use? Of course he would. Wouldn't he at least threaten the executive order to get a better bill if that's the direction he was going? He's not doing any of that. So we have to conclude that his position is completely disingenuous.
So one of the things that I think motivates the federal government's decision to avoid canceling federal student loan debt is because it's essentially a form of regressive taxation, right? Because these aren't interest-free federal loans. There's interest associated with it. And I just looked up the recent interest rates for the 2020 to 2021 school year. And for undergraduates, the interest rate is 2.75%. Federal rates for unsubsidized graduate student loans and parent loans are higher at 4.30% and 5.30% respectively. When you consider the fact that the bulk of outstanding student loan debt, I mean to the tune of $1.5 trillion, is federal student loans, and you consider the amount of money the federal government brings in through the interest rates attached to those loans, well, I mean, they don't want to tax the rich, but they certainly want to bring in some revenue through charging interest to these students who had no choice because education is so astronomical in this country that they had to take out these loans just to get an education, just to get a college education. So I think that is a motivating factor. And Cenk, to your point, there certainly is current law indicating that the education secretary can just cancel this student loan debt. There is no limit on it. So it's called the Higher Education Act of 1965. I'll read you a little from it. It's section 432A of the Higher Education Act, and it grants the United States Secretary of Education the authority to modify, compromise, waive, or release any right, title, claim, lien, or demand, however acquired, including any equity or any right of redemption. So that is the exact law that indicates that the education secretary can just cancel the student loan debt, but they wouldn't be able to collect those, that interest if they did that.
Yeah, and the Biden administration right now is aggressively arguing against the plain reading of that statute. They're telling the press, we don't think that statute applies. Why? First of all, you're not accurate. That's not true. We just read you the statute. But second of all, why are you helping the Republicans make their case against you? Guys, you've got to, if you're just a normal independent person that it does not live in the area of Washington, D.C., you've got to be thinking, why would the Democratic president make the case against his own proposal and help the other party? I wonder if there's some other game afoot here. And of course, the right-wing populists give you, oh yeah, it's Soros and space lasers and no, it's the donors. It's super easy. And by the way, Soros is one of the donors, but and his problem isn't, as the right wing thinks, because of his ethnicity or background. It's because he's part of a donor class that gives money to politicians like the Koch brothers and the Mercers who come from a different background than Soros. And all of those guys, and most importantly, ExxonMobil, Goldman Sachs, et cetera, the corporations, they control our politicians. So the Democrats do a better job of acting like they care about people. And to be fair, they oftentimes do give you more than the Republicans. So when it comes to, after we have gone through a primary and we've tried to get a progressive into office, sometimes I'll tell you, well, it's a general election, you should vote for the Democrat instead of the Republican. Why? Because a quarter of the time, they're way better than the Republicans. But imagine if the Democratic Party was the Democratic Party 100% of the time. And then they weren't making things up and helping the Republicans on the down low 3/4 of the time. And the reason they don't is because of that, the donor cash. And so So again, this one's not complicated. One last thing, guys. What would I do? Okay, because we try to do constructive critique here, right? If I was the president, I would call a press conference if I actually cared about this. First of all, I wouldn't even call a press conference. I'd cancel the student debt with an executive order and I'd be done with it. And then 44 million people who got relief would love the Democratic Party probably for the rest of their lives.
Game over, game over, game over. He would be, I mean, think about your legacy, Biden. Like, think about what that would do to your legacy. All of the horrendous things that you've done, right? I'm not gonna say that they're gonna be completely erased, but if you wanna prove that you are, really serious about meeting the current moment with the type of robust policies and executive orders that would be proportionate to what Americans are experiencing right now, cancel the student loan debt. Why are we having this discussion? Don't be afraid to be popular. This is easy, easy.
So guys, look, that's why I juxtapose us oftentimes with the mainstream media, because you could watch them or read them and then you could come here and then you could check the receipts. You could check the facts for yourself. So for example, Forbes had all the right facts in one of the articles written about this, but when they got to the analysis part, they didn't label it analysis, but that's okay. I don't mind them doing analysis. They said, curiously, Joe Biden hasn't asked for permission from the Republicans. He didn't ask for permission. They said, curiously, and that's a direct quote, that Joe Biden is basically not looking for bipartisanship here. Now, wait a minute. Why are you framing it like Biden is guilty for being too progressive when Biden just told you he's not going to do it? And why are you saying that the Democrat should by definition ask for permission from Republicans when the Republicans didn't win? You didn't write the article in that way. Nobody ever said, curiously, Trump didn't ask for permission from Democrats. Trump never asked for permission and nobody ever thought he should ask for permission from Democrats. So they frame it in a way where they say, now remember, everybody be bipartisan, which in Washington means don't do anything and do not help the average American. So finally, to come back to the hypothetical, if I couldn't do it through executive order, I would just call a press conference and I would read that statute that Anna just read you and say, look, I know the Republicans have a war on reading, but I just read it to you. It says we can waive or cancel any equity or debt. We can do it. And so if you have trouble with the English language, you will be opposed to us. But the rest of you who are capable of reading will see that we have every right to do it. We have every authority to do it. And I would end the press conference with, you're welcome.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.